The November wind cut through the Wyoming Territory like a knife, and Harrison Quincy had learned to accept the cold as his only companion on the ranch, 5 miles outside Springerville. He stepped into his barn that morning expecting nothing more than the usual tasks of feeding horses and mucking stalls, but instead found a woman curled in the hay, her clothes torn and blood-stained, her face pale as moonlight. Harrison froze, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before stopping. The woman was clearly in no condition to pose a threat. Her breathing came shallow and quick, and even in sleep, pain etched lines across her young face. He guessed she could not be more than 22 or 23, perhaps a year or two younger than his own 26 years. "Miss." Harrison knelt beside her, keeping his voice soft. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of amber catching sunlight. Fear flashed across her features, and she tried to scramble backward through the hay, wincing as the movement clearly caused her pain. "Easy now," Harrison said, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "You are on my property, but I am not going to hurt you. You look like you have been through hell already." The woman's chest heaved as she studied his face, clearly trying to determine if he could be trusted. After a long moment, her shoulders sagged, and she seemed to make a decision born of pure exhaustion. "I am sorry for trespassing. I just needed somewhere to rest. I will leave." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled immediately. Harrison caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how thin she had become beneath the tattered remains of what had once been a quality traveling dress. "You are not going anywhere in this condition. When did you last eat?" "3 days ago," she whispered. "Maybe 4, I lost count." Harrison felt anger rise in his chest, though not at her. "Come on. Let me get you to the house. You need food and those wounds need tending." "I cannot impose," she protested weakly, but Harrison was already lifting her, surprised at how light she felt. "It is not an imposition. It is basic human decency, something that seems to be in short supply out here." He carried her across the yard to his small ranch house, shouldering open the door and bringing her to the bedroom. It had been his parents' room once, before the fever took them both 3 years ago. He had not been able to bring himself to sleep in it since. He settled her on the bed as gently as he could. "I am going to get some water and food. Do not try to move. You are safe here, I give you my word." When he returned minutes later with a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and a plate of bread and cold chicken from his larder, she was crying silently, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "What is wrong? Are you in pain?" Harrison set down his burdens and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "You are being kind to me," she said, her voice breaking. "I had forgotten what kindness felt like." Harrison felt his throat tighten. "Tell me what happened to you. Tell me who did this." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "My name is Amelia Porter. I came west from Philadelphia 6 months ago after my parents died of cholera. I had an uncle in Cheyenne who wrote that he could give me work in his shop. But when I arrived, there was no uncle, no shop. He had died 2 months before his letter reached me." Harrison listened, his hands working methodically to clean the cuts on her arms while she spoke. Some were clearly defensive wounds made by someone trying to protect themselves. "I had no money to get back east," Amelia continued. "I took work wherever I could find it, but decent jobs for unmarried women are scarce. I ended up working in a saloon in Laramie, just serving drinks, nothing more. But the owner, he had other ideas about what my job should include." Her voice hardened. "His name was Marcus Dalton. He tried to force himself on me 3 nights ago. I fought back. There was a knife on the bar and I grabbed it. I did not mean to stab him, but when he would not stop, I had no choice. I do not even know if he is alive or dead. I just ran." Harrison's hand stilled. "You defended yourself. That is not murder, that is survival." "I do not think the law will see it that way," Amelia said bitterly. "I am nobody. He owned half of Laramie. Even if he lives, he will paint me as a thief or a whore who turned violent. I have been running ever since, stealing food when I could, sleeping wherever I could hide. I saw your barn last night and I was just so tired." Harrison sat back, processing everything she had told him. The smart thing would be to give her a meal, maybe a few supplies, and send her on her way. Getting involved in something like this could bring trouble to his doorstep. But as he looked at Amelia, at the exhaustion and fear in her eyes, at the way she held herself like someone who had been beaten down by the world but refused to stay down, he found he could not do it. "How badly do you think you hurt him?" Harrison asked. "I felt the knife go in deep, somewhere in his shoulder or chest. There was so much blood." Amelia shuddered. "But he was still shouting when I ran. I think he lived, which means he is probably looking for me." Harrison stood and walked to the window, looking out at the land he had worked so hard to build into something worthwhile. The ranch was modest but successful, with good horses and enough cattle to turn a profit. He had always imagined that one day he might find a woman to share it with, someone to ease the loneliness that had become his constant companion. But he had never imagined circumstances like these. "Eat," he said finally. "Get your strength back. We will figure out what to do." Over the next 3 days, Amelia slowly recovered. Harrison brought her meals and fresh water, tended her wounds, and gave her privacy to bathe and change into some of his mother's old dresses that he had kept in a trunk. They fit reasonably well, though Amelia was taller than his mother had been, and the hems fell a few inches too short. They talked during those days, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Harrison learned that Amelia loved to read, that she had been educated at a girls' academy in Philadelphia, that she had a quick wit and a laugh that seemed to light up the room. Amelia learned that Harrison had been running the ranch alone since his parents died, that he loved the land but hated the isolation, that he had a gentle way with animals and a quiet strength that came from years of hard work. On the 4th day, Amelia was well enough to walk around the house. Harrison came in from morning chores to find her at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon. "You do not have to do that," he said, though the smell made his stomach growl. He usually just ate bread and cheese for breakfast, too tired to bother with real cooking. "I want to. You have done so much for me. Let me do something in return." Amelia turned to look at him, and Harrison was struck by how different she looked from the broken woman he had found in his barn. Her eyes were clear, her skin had regained some color, and there was a determination in her bearing that had been absent before. They ate together at the small table, and Harrison found himself reluctant for the meal to end. Having her company specifically, made the house feel like a home instead of just a place he slept between long days of work. "I should move on soon," Amelia said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "You have been incredibly generous, but I cannot stay here forever. People will talk, and if anyone comes looking for me, I do not want to bring trouble to your door." "About that," Harrison said. He had been thinking about this for 3 days, turning it over in his mind until he was sure. "I have an idea, but you might think I am crazy." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "After everything I have been through, I doubt anything could seem crazy to me now." Harrison took a deep breath. "Marry me." The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia stared at him, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "Not for real," Harrison clarified quickly. "I mean, it would be legally real, but it would be practical. If you are my wife, you have a legitimate reason to be here. You would have my name, my protection. If anyone comes looking for a woman named Amelia Porter, they will find Amelia Quincy, a respectable married woman. It would give you a fresh start." "That is insane," Amelia said, but her voice held wonder rather than rejection. "Why would you do that for me?" "You barely know me." "I know enough," Harrison said. "I know you are brave. I know you are a fighter. I know that what happened to you was not your fault and you deserve better than to spend your life running. And honestly, it would help me too. Single men my age raise eyebrows out here. People wonder what is wrong with you. A wife would give me a certain respectability too." Amelia set down her fork and folded her hands in her lap. Harrison noticed they were trembling slightly. "What would you expect from me, as your wife?" "Nothing you are not willing to give," Harrison said firmly. "You would have your own room. We would be partners, helping run this ranch together, but I would never force anything more. If someday you wanted to leave, to go back east or anywhere else, I would not stop you. But at least you would have time to rest, to recover, to plan your next move without looking over your shoulder. You are offering me your name, your home, your protection, and asking nothing in return." Amelia's voice cracked. "Why?" Harrison met her eyes. "Because someone should. Because I have been alone in this house for 3 years, and in 4 days you have made it feel alive again. Because it is the right thing to do, and out here, people do not do the right thing often enough." Amelia stood and walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. Harrison let her think, let her process. He knew it was a wild proposal, born of compassion and impulse in equal measure, but somehow it felt right. "If I say yes," Amelia said finally, "I want to be honest with you about something. I did not just work in a saloon. When I was desperately low on money before Laramie, I did things I am not proud of. I never sold my body, but I came close. I lied, I stole food, I manipulated men into buying me meals. I am not some innocent victim. I made hard choices to survive." "We all do what we must to survive," Harrison said. "I hold nothing against you." Amelia turned to face him. "You are serious about this? You really want to marry me?" "I do." "Then I accept." They rode into Springerville that afternoon, Amelia wearing one of the better dresses from the trunk and Harrison in his Sunday clothes. The town was small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a few other businesses. The circuit judge was in town, as luck would have it, staying at the boarding house while he heard cases. Judge William Harrison had a kind face and shrewd eyes. He looked over his spectacles at Harrison and Amelia as they stood in his temporary chambers at the boarding house. "You want to get married right now, this moment?" The judge seemed amused. "Yes, sir," Harrison said. "We have already delayed too long as it is." "I have known you since you were a boy, Harrison Quincy. You have always been a steady, sensible man. Are you sure about this?" "More sure than I have been about anything in a long time." The judge turned to Amelia. "And you, Miss Porter, you are entering this marriage of your own free will." "I am," Amelia said, and her voice was strong and clear. "Well then, let us get to it. Do you have rings?" Harrison had not thought of that, but Amelia reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. It is all I have left of her. If you would wear it, Harrison, I would be honored." Something in Harrison's chest tightened. He took the ring, feeling the weight of it, of what it meant. "I will wear it proudly." The judge performed a simple ceremony, speaking the words that would bind them together in the eyes of God and law. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison took Amelia's hand gently, not wanting to presume more, but she leaned up and kissed his cheek softly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a future." They registered the marriage at the town hall, making it official. Harrison introduced Amelia to a few people they passed on the street, watching as she smiled and played the part of the new bride perfectly. If anyone thought it was strange that Harrison Quincy had suddenly acquired a wife, they were too polite to say so to his face. On the ride back to the ranch, Amelia was quiet. Harrison let her be, understanding that she must be processing everything that had happened. In the span of a week, she had gone from terrified and alone to married and protected. It was a lot for anyone to absorb. That night, Harrison showed Amelia to the bedroom she would use, his old childhood room that he had already cleaned and prepared. "If you need anything, I am just down the hall. Sleep well, Amelia." She caught his hand as he turned to leave. "Harrison, thank you. I know I already said it, but I need you to know how much this means to me. You do not have to keep thanking me. We are partners now. We help each other." Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine. Harrison would wake before dawn to tend the animals, and he would return to find Amelia had already made breakfast. She threw herself into learning the work of the ranch, insisting that if this was to be her home, she needed to understand how it operated. Harrison taught her to care for the horses, to mend fences, to check the cattle. She learned quickly, her hands growing rough with work but her spirit seeming to strengthen with each passing day. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and Amelia would read aloud from the books that had been his mother's, her voice bringing life to the words. One evening in early December, as snow began to fall outside, Amelia set down the book she had been reading and looked at Harrison across the fire. "I need to tell you something," she said. Harrison felt his stomach tighten. "What is it?" "I am happy here, truly happy. These past weeks have been the most peaceful of my entire life. I wake up each morning without fear, and I go to sleep each night knowing I am safe. I did not think I would ever feel this way again." "I am glad," Harrison said, relief washing through him. "I am happy too. Happier than I have been in years. I want you to know that I do not see this as just an arrangement anymore," Amelia continued. "You have become my friend, Harrison, my true friend, and I hope that maybe someday we could be more than that." Harrison's heart began to pound. "I would like that very much, but I do not want to rush you. You have been through so much. Whatever happens between us should happen naturally when you are ready." Amelia smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "You are a good man, Harrison Quincy, the best I have ever known." Winter deepened, and with it, so did their connection. Harrison found himself looking forward to the end of each day, knowing he would get to sit with Amelia, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about her parents, about the dreams she had once had before life became about mere survival. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about losing his parents, about the loneliness that had nearly swallowed him whole. One night in January, a blizzard trapped them inside for 3 days. They huddled by the fire, burning through their stockpile of wood to keep warm. On the second night, Amelia admitted she was scared, not of the storm, but of everything she had been holding inside. "I keep thinking about that night in Laramie," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I keep seeing the blood, feeling the knife in my hand. What if I killed him, Harrison? What if he died?" Harrison moved from his chair to sit beside her on the floor by the fire. "Then he died because he tried to force himself on you. That is on him, not you. You have nothing to feel guilty about." "But I should feel guilty," Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. "I should feel terrible about possibly taking a life, but I do not. I just feel glad that I survived." "Does that make me a monster?" "It makes you human." Harrison wrapped an arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him, sobbing against his chest. He held her while she cried, feeling her pain as if it were his own. When her tears finally subsided, she did not pull away. "I feel safe with you," she murmured. "For the first time in so long, I feel safe. You are safe. I promise you that. I will never let anyone hurt you again." She tilted her face up to look at him, and Harrison saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Amelia answered by threading her fingers through his hair and kissing him back with a fervor that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amelia rested her forehead against his. "I am falling in love with you," she whispered. "I did not think I could love anyone after everything that happened, but I am falling in love with you." "I already love you," Harrison said. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you in my barn, so fierce and fragile at the same time. I love you, Amelia." That night, Amelia did not return to her own room. They lay together in Harrison's bed, holding each other close, content with kisses and whispered words. There was no rush, no pressure. They had time. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, the snow melting to reveal the green grass beneath. The ranch came alive with new calves and foals, and Harrison and Amelia worked side by side to care for them all. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, moving from friendship to love to something even stronger. One morning in late April, as they worked together to repair a section of fence, Amelia suddenly stopped and grabbed Harrison's arm. "What is it?" he asked, instantly alert. "Riders. 3 of them, coming from the east." Harrison turned to look where she was pointing and saw the dust cloud in the distance. His hand instinctively went to the rifle he now carried whenever they were far from the house. "Go back to the house. Take the horse and go now." "I am not leaving you," Amelia said firmly. "Amelia, please. If this is about Laramie, if someone is looking for you, I need to know you are safe." She grabbed the rifle from his hands before he could react. "We face this together. That is what partners do. That is what people who love each other do." Harrison wanted to argue, but the riders were already close enough to make out. 3 men, rough-looking, with the air of hired guns about them. They reined in their horses a dozen yards away. "You Harrison Quincy?" the lead rider asked. He was a lean man with a scar running down one cheek. "I am. This is private property. State your business." "We are looking for a woman. Amelia Porter. Word is she might have passed through these parts." Harrison felt Amelia tense beside him, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I am Amelia Quincy. Amelia Porter does not exist anymore." The scarred man leaned forward in his saddle. "Marcus Dalton is offering a reward for information leading to your capture, $500. That is a lot of money." "For what crime?" Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer. "Attempted murder. Theft. She stabbed Mr. Dalton and robbed his safe before running. He nearly died." "That is a lie," Amelia said, her voice ringing clear. "I stabbed him in self-defense when he tried to rape me. I took nothing that was not owed to me in wages he refused to pay. If he wants to press charges, he is welcome to, but he will have to explain to a judge why he tried to force himself on his employee." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "That is not how Mr. Dalton tells it. And out here, who do you think a judge will believe? A respectable businessman or some saloon girl?" "A married woman," Harrison said firmly. "My wife. And I will stand beside her and testify to her character. Now get off my land." One of the other riders, younger and more nervous-looking, spoke up. "There is a reward, mister. $500. We are just trying to collect. You are trespassing and you are threatening my wife. I am giving you one chance to leave peacefully." The scarred man studied them both, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spat in the dirt. "This is not over. Dalton wants her back in Laramie to face justice. We will be back with the law." "You do that," Harrison said. "Bring the law, bring a judge. We have nothing to hide." The 3 riders turned and left, but Harrison knew this was far from finished. He looked at Amelia, saw the fear returning to her eyes, and felt anger burn in his chest. "We need to be prepared," he said. "If they come back, we need to have our story straight and be ready to defend it." But Amelia was already shaking her head. "I should leave. I should go before I ruin your life too. You have done so much for me, Harrison. I will not let them destroy everything you have built here. You are not going anywhere." Harrison took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "We are in this together. You are my wife in every way that matters. I will not let them take you." Over the next week, Harrison and Amelia prepared as best they could. They rode into Springerville and spoke with the judge, who was still in town handling cases. Harrison explained the situation, leaving nothing out. Judge Williams listened carefully, his expression grave. "This is a serious accusation," the judge said, "but I have known you all your life, Harrison, and I have watched your wife these past months. She seems to be a woman of good character." "She is," Harrison said firmly. "She was desperate and afraid, and she defended herself. That is not a crime." "In the eyes of the law, it depends on the circumstances. If Dalton presses charges, there will have to be a trial. But I will make sure she gets a fair hearing. You have my word on that." They returned to the ranch feeling slightly better but still uneasy. Harrison increased his vigilance, keeping weapons close at hand and watching the horizon for any sign of trouble. 2 weeks later, the trouble arrived. This time it was not hired guns but the territorial marshal, a no-nonsense man named Robert Garrett, accompanied by 2 deputies. Harrison and Amelia met them in the yard. "Mrs. Quincy," Marshal Garrett said, tipping his hat, "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of assault with a deadly weapon and theft. You will need to come with me to stand trial in Laramie." Amelia's face went white, but she lifted her chin. "I understand, Marshal, but I want you to know that I acted in self-defense. Marcus Dalton tried to rape me. That will be for a jury to decide, madam. I am just here to bring you in." Harrison stepped forward. "She is not going anywhere alone. I am coming with her." "That is your right," the marshal said, "but I should warn you Dalton has money and influence in Laramie. This will not be an easy fight." "I do not care," Harrison said. "She is my wife. I will fight for her." The journey to Laramie took 3 days. The marshal allowed Amelia to ride without shackles, a small mercy. They stayed in cheap boarding houses along the way, and each night Harrison held Amelia close, promising her that everything would be all right even when he was not sure he believed it himself. Laramie was bigger than Springerville, a rough town that had grown quickly with the railroad. The jail was a sturdy building on the main street, and that was where they took Amelia. Harrison tried to stay with her, but the jailer refused. "You can visit during calling hours," the man said gruffly. "But she stays here until the trial." Harrison felt helpless as they led Amelia away. She looked back at him once, her eyes pleading with him not to give up. He nodded, trying to convey his determination. Over the next 2 days, Harrison worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial. He hired a lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Margaret Winters, who had earned a reputation for taking difficult cases. She listened to Amelia's story, took copious notes, and laid out their strategy. "The key is to put Dalton's character on trial as much as your wife's actions," Margaret said. "If we can show a pattern of him taking advantage of women in his employ, we can establish reasonable doubt about his version of events." "How do we do that?" Harrison asked. "We find other women he has hurt, and we pray they are brave enough to testify." Margaret was thorough. She spent the next week interviewing women who had worked at Dalton's saloon, and she found 3 willing to testify that Dalton had made unwanted advances, that he was known for treating his female employees as if they were there for his personal pleasure. It was not much, but it was something. The trial began on a Monday morning in early June. The courtroom was packed with curious onlookers. Marcus Dalton sat at the prosecutor's table, his arm in a sling, playing the part of the wounded victim. He was a handsome man in his early 40s, well-dressed and confident. When he looked at Amelia, his eyes were hard as stone. The prosecutor laid out his case with practiced ease. Dalton had given Amelia a job out of the kindness of his heart. She had performed her duties adequately, but had shown signs of instability. On the night in question, she had attempted to steal money from his office safe. When he confronted her, she had attacked him with a knife, nearly killing him before fleeing with the money. It was a simple narrative, and the prosecutor sold it well. Several of Dalton's employees testified that they had seen Amelia near the office that night, that she had seemed nervous and distracted. The doctor who had treated Dalton testified about the severity of the wound, describing how close the blade had come to piercing his lung. When it was the defense's turn, Margaret Winters stood and called her first witness, Amelia Quincy. Amelia took the stand with her head held high. She had insisted on wearing the simple dress she had worn to marry Harrison, saying she wanted to face this as his wife, not as Amelia Porter. She swore on the Bible to tell the truth, and then she told her story. She spoke of coming west, of losing her uncle, of struggling to survive. She described taking the job at the saloon with hopes of honest work. And then she described the night Marcus Dalton called her to his office, ostensibly to discuss her wages. "He locked the door behind me," Amelia said, her voice steady but soft. "I remember thinking it was strange. He poured himself a drink and offered me one. I declined. He asked me if I knew how pretty I was. I thanked him and said I wanted to discuss my wages. That was when he told me that if I was nice to him, he could ensure I was very well compensated." "What did you understand him to mean by that?" Margaret asked. "I understood that he was propositioning me. I told him I was not interested, that I just wanted to do my job and be paid fairly. He laughed. He said I was working in a saloon, that I should not put on airs. He grabbed my arm and pulled me close. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger. He pushed me against the desk and started tearing at my dress." Amelia's voice wavered, but she continued. "I fought him. I scratched his face, tried to knee him. He hit me, hard enough that I saw stars. When I could focus again, I saw a letter opener on the desk. It was the only thing within reach that could be a weapon. I grabbed it and told him to let me go. He laughed again and lunged for me. I swung without thinking. The blade went into his shoulder. He screamed and stumbled back, and I ran. I did not take any money. I just ran." The courtroom was silent when she finished. Margaret let the moment breathe before asking her next question. "Mrs. Quincy, why did you not go to the law?" "Because I did not think anyone would believe me. I was nobody, just another woman trying to survive in a town where men like Marcus Dalton made the rules. I was terrified that if I stayed, I would hang for defending myself." Margaret nodded and turned to the jury. "Let me be clear about something. My client is not claiming she did not stab Marcus Dalton. She absolutely did. But she did so to protect herself from sexual assault. That is not a crime. That is survival." The prosecutor cross-examined Amelia aggressively, trying to poke holes in her story, suggesting she had been drinking, that she had encouraged Dalton's advances, and then changed her mind. But Amelia held firm, never wavering from her account. Then Margaret called her other witnesses. 3 women, all former employees of Dalton's saloon, testified about his inappropriate behavior. One described how he had cornered her in the storage room and propositioned her. Another told of how he had fired her when she refused to accompany him to his private rooms upstairs. A third spoke through tears about how he had forced himself on her, and then paid her to keep quiet. Dalton's face grew redder with each testimony. When the prosecutor recalled him to refute these claims, he was flustered and angry, insisting that these women were lying, that they had been put up to this. "Why would they lie?" Margaret asked during her cross-examination. "What do they have to gain? They risk their reputations by coming forward. They risk being labeled as troublemakers. Why would they do that unless they were telling the truth?" Dalton had no good answer. The closing arguments took place on Friday afternoon. The prosecutor painted Amelia as a desperate woman who had turned violent when caught in the act of theft. Margaret painted Dalton as a predator who had finally met someone who fought back. Marcus Dalton is a man who believed he was entitled to the bodies of the women who worked for him, Margaret said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. He believed that because he paid their wages, he owned them. Amelia Quincy proved him wrong. She fought for her life, for her dignity, for her right to say no. If you find her guilty, you are telling every woman in this territory that they must submit or face prison. I pray you make the right choice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Harrison sat beside Amelia in the courtroom, holding her hand, whispering reassurances even as his own heart pounded with fear. When the jury finally filed back in, their faces were impossible to read. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant not guilty by reason of self-defense. On the charge of theft, we find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom erupted in noise. Harrison pulled Amelia into his arms, feeling her sob against his chest. It was over. She was free. As they left the courthouse, Marcus Dalton stood on the steps, his face twisted with rage. "This is not over," he hissed at Amelia. "I will make sure everyone knows what you are." Harrison stepped between them. "You lay a finger on her, you even speak her name, and I will make sure every newspaper from here to San Francisco knows exactly what kind of man you are. Stay away from my wife." Dalton glared but said nothing more. He turned and stalked away, and Harrison felt some of the tension leave his body. They were truly free. The journey back to Springerville took longer than the trip to Laramie. They stopped at a small inn halfway home, and for the first time since the trial began, they were able to truly relax. That night, in the privacy of their room, Amelia and Harrison made love for the first time as husband and wife in every sense of the word. It was tender and slow, a celebration of everything they had been through together. Amelia cried, but this time they were tears of joy, of relief, of love. Harrison held her afterward, marveling at how much his life had changed since that November morning when he had found her in his barn. "I love you," Amelia whispered into the darkness. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Harrison said. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known. I am honored to be your husband." They returned to the ranch in mid-June, and it felt like coming home in a way Harrison had never experienced before. The land was green, the animals were thriving, and most importantly, they were together and free. Summer passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. They hired a hand to help with the cattle, a young man named Thomas who proved to be a hard worker and asked no questions about their past. The ranch prospered, and with it, so did Harrison and Amelia's love. In September, Amelia realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison one evening after dinner, and the joy on his face made her heart swell. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happier than I have ever been. You have given me everything, Amelia, everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Amelia continued to work the ranch until she grew too large to move comfortably. Harrison fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest, bringing her anything she desired. It would have been annoying if it were not so endearing. In late April, as spring returned to Wyoming, Amelia went into labor. Harrison rode like hell to bring the doctor from Springerville, and then he paced outside the bedroom door for 12 hours, praying with every breath. Finally, he heard a baby's cry, strong and healthy. The doctor emerged with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Quincy, a healthy, perfect son." Harrison burst into the room to find Amelia cradling a tiny, red-faced infant. She looked exhausted but radiant. "Harrison, meet Henry," she said softly. "Henry Marcus Quincy." Harrison felt his eyes burn with tears. "You gave him my father's name. And Marcus, so he knows his mother is a fighter," Amelia said with a tired smile. "So he never forgets to stand up for what is right." Harrison kissed his wife, then his son, feeling a love so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. His family. His real, true family. The years passed with a gentleness that Harrison had never thought possible. Henry grew into a strong, curious boy with his mother's amber eyes and his father's steady temperament. 2 years after Henry was born, Amelia gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, and 2 years after that, another son they named Thomas, after the ranch hand who had become like family to them. The ranch expanded and thrived. Harrison bred some of the finest horses in the territory, and people came from miles around to buy from him. Amelia kept the books and managed the household, but she also broke horses alongside Harrison and taught their children to read and write. They never forgot the hardship that had brought them together. Every year on the anniversary of the day Harrison found Amelia in his barn, they would sit together and remember how far they had come. Amelia sometimes wondered what had become of Marcus Dalton. They heard through occasional travelers that his saloon had gone downhill after the trial, that his reputation had been irreparably damaged. Eventually, word reached them that he had left Laramie entirely. Amelia felt no particular satisfaction in his downfall. She was simply grateful she had survived and found a life worth living. As the children grew, Harrison and Amelia told them their story, age-appropriate versions at first, and then the full truth when they were old enough to understand. They wanted their children to know that their mother was brave, that she had fought for her life and her dignity, and that there was no shame in fighting back against those who sought to harm you. Henry, their eldest, took this lesson to heart. When he was 16, he defended a young woman in town who was being harassed by a drunk cowhand. The cowhand ended up with a black eye and a stern lecture from Harrison about respecting women. Henry had his father's sense of justice and his mother's fierce protectiveness. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman who had her mother's intelligence and her father's steady nature. She could ride and shoot as well as any man, but she also loved learning and books. When she was 18, she announced she wanted to go east to attend a women's college. Amelia and Harrison supported her decision, though it broke their hearts to see her leave. Thomas, the youngest, was the gentlest of their children. He loved the land and the animals, and from a young age it was clear he would be the one to eventually take over the ranch. He had a gift with horses that even Harrison marveled at. As Harrison and Amelia grew older, they found even more appreciation for what they had built together. On warm summer evenings, they would sit on the porch they had expanded over the years, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. "Do you ever regret it?" Amelia asked one such evening. She was 52 now, her hair streaked with silver, lines around her eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to Harrison, she was as beautiful as the day he had found her. "Regret what?" he asked, "offering me your name, taking on all my troubles. You could have had an easier life." Harrison took her hand. his own weathered and scarred from decades of ranch work. I could have had a lonelier life. I could have had a life without you, without our children, without all of this. That is not a life I would have wanted. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Amelia Quincy. You are still the best thing. Amelia leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching as Thomas worked with a young colt in the corral. Henry and his wife were visiting with their 2 children, Amelia and Harrison's grandchildren, and the sound of children's laughter drifted from the house. "We did well, did we not?" Amelia said softly. "We did better than well. We built something real and lasting." In the years that followed, Harrison and Amelia transitioned more of the ranch work to Thomas, though they still helped where they could. They took joy in their growing number of grandchildren. Rose eventually returned from the East with a husband, a professor of literature who had been captivated by her intelligence and spirit. They settled in Cheyenne, where Rose opened a school for girls, but they visited often. Henry took over the horse breeding aspect of the ranch and proved to have an even better eye for quality animals than his father. The Quincy name became synonymous with the finest horses in Wyoming Territory, and later, after statehood was achieved, in the entire state. On a cool autumn day in 1910, Harrison and Amelia celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch, now significantly expanded with a larger house and multiple barns. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, and the celebration lasted from dawn until late into the night. As the party wound down and family members settled into various rooms and outbuildings for the night, Harrison and Amelia found themselves alone on the porch once more, wrapped in blankets against the chill. 35 years, Amelia mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in that barn. Other times, it feels like I have always been here with you. You have always been here, Harrison said. Even before I met you, there was something missing. I just did not know what it was until you filled that space. You saved my life, you know, Amelia said, turning to look at him. Even at 57, his eyes still held the same kindness that had made her feel safe all those years ago. No, Harrison corrected gently. You saved your own life. You fought, you survived, you refused to give up. I just gave you a safe place to land. We saved each other, Amelia decided. That is what partners do. Harrison smiled and kissed her forehead. That is what people who love each other do. They sat together until the moon rose high in the sky, talking about their life, their children, their hopes for the future. They spoke of maybe traveling a bit now that Thomas was fully capable of running the ranch. Amelia wanted to see the ocean. Harrison wanted to visit San Francisco. They made plans, dreamed dreams, and held each other close. The following spring, they did take that trip west to San Francisco. They took the train, marveling at how much the world had changed since they were young. They saw the ocean, walked along the beach, and stayed in a fancy hotel that would have seemed impossibly luxurious to their younger selves. On the beach one morning, with the waves crashing nearby and the salt air filling their lungs, Harrison pulled Amelia close and said, "If I could go back and live my life over, I would not change a single thing. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of loneliness led me to that barn on that November morning. It led me to you." Amelia kissed him, tasting salt and love and years of partnership. "I would not change anything either, except maybe I would have found your barn sooner." They returned home to Wyoming refreshed and ready for whatever years remained to them. They were blessed with good health and continued to be active parts of their children's and grandchildren's lives. As Harrison entered his 70s, he began to slow down, but his mind remained sharp. He loved sitting with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days, of what Wyoming had been like before statehood, before the railroad truly opened up the territory. Amelia remained active, still riding out to check on the cattle even as her children protested that she should take it easier. "I am not dead yet," she would retort. "And when I am, you can bury me on this land I love, but until then I will do as I please." On a summer day in 1920, Harrison and Amelia had been married for 45 years. They were sitting on their porch, as was their custom, watching the sunset. Harrison had grown quieter in recent months, content to simply be in Amelia's presence rather than filling every silence with words. "Are you happy?" Amelia asked him. Harrison turned to her, his eyes still clear despite his 71 years. "More than I have any right to be. You have given me a life beyond anything I imagined, Amelia. A family, a legacy, a love that has only grown deeper with time. What more could any man want?" "I want more years with you," Amelia admitted. "I want decades more. I want to see our great-grandchildren grow up. I want to keep sitting on this porch with you, watching these sunsets, holding your hand." "Then that is what we will have," Harrison promised, though they both knew that promises like that were not theirs to keep. But they were fortunate. Harrison lived to be 76, and Amelia was by his side every day. When he passed peacefully in his sleep one winter night in 1925, Amelia held his hand and whispered all the things she had always told him. That he was her salvation, her partner, her great love. The funeral brought together 4 generations of Quincy family. They buried Harrison on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land he had loved so much. Amelia stood straight and strong throughout the service, drawing on the same strength that had allowed her to survive so much in her youth. She lived another 8 years, and by all accounts, they were good years. She saw her great-grandchildren born, taught them to ride, told them stories of their grandfather and the life they had built together. She was respected throughout the state as a pioneer woman who had helped build Wyoming into what it had become. On a spring morning in 1933, Amelia passed away in her sleep at the age of 80. She was buried beside Harrison on that same hill, their headstones simple but elegant, bearing their names and the years they had lived. But to those who knew their story, those stones represented so much more. They represented a lonely rancher who chose kindness over caution, a desperate woman who refused to stop fighting, and a love that grew from the most unlikely circumstances into something that endured long after they were gone. The Quincy Ranch remained in the family for generations, and with it, the story of Harrison and Amelia was passed down to each new generation. It became a legend of sorts, a reminder that love could be found in the darkest times, that courage and kindness could change lives, and that sometimes the best things in life came from being willing to take a chance on someone who needed help. In the years that followed, historians studying the settlement of Wyoming Territory would sometimes come across records of the Quincy Ranch and the unusual circumstances of Harrison and Amelia's marriage. Some would write about it as an example of frontier practicality, of marriages of convenience that turned into genuine partnerships. But those who took the time to research deeper, to read the letters that Amelia had written to her daughter Rose over the years, or the journal that Harrison had kept sporadically, understood that this was not just a marriage of convenience. It was a love story. Pure and simple. 2 people who had found each other when they both needed someone most, who had chosen each other again and again over the course of decades, who had built not just a successful ranch but a family full of love and strength and resilience. The barn where Harrison had first found Amelia still stood on the ranch property well into the 20th century. Eventually, It became too old and unsafe to use, but the family could not bring themselves to tear it down. Instead, they reinforced it and turned it into a sort of family museum, filled with artifacts from Harrison and Amelia's life together. There were photographs, tools they had used, some of Amelia's dresses, Harrison's saddle, and most precious of all, the marriage certificate from that day in 1875 when Judge Williams had bound them together. When the great-great-grandchildren of Harrison and Amelia would visit the barn, now properly maintained as a historical site, they would hear the story of how it all began. They would learn about the scared young woman who had taken refuge in this very building, and the kind man who had offered her not just shelter but his name, his protection, and eventually, his heart. The story of Harrison Quincy and Amelia Porter Quincy became one of the founding legends of Springerville, Wyoming. It was taught in schools as an example of frontier resilience and the power of compassion. But more importantly, it was whispered to young people in love, reminding them that true love was not just about passion and romance. It was about partnership, about standing beside someone through their darkest times, about choosing each other every single day. The land itself seemed to remember them. The hill where they were buried became a place of peace, where family members would come to think, to remember, to connect with the legacy that Harrison and Amelia had left behind. Wild roses grew around their graves, planted by Rose before her own death, and these flowers bloomed faithfully every spring, as if the earth itself wanted to celebrate the love that had taken root there so many years ago. In the end, what Harrison and Amelia had built together was more than a successful ranch or a large family. They had created a legacy of love, courage, and second chances. They had proven that sometimes the most extraordinary lives came from the simplest acts of kindness, and that offering someone your name could be the beginning of a story that would echo through generations. Their great-great-grandson, who bore the name Harrison Quincy just as his great-grandfather had, would sometimes stand on that hill and imagine what it must have been like for the original Harrison to find Amelia in his barn. He would wonder if his great-grandfather had known, even then, that his life was about to change forever. He suspected that Harrison probably had not known, could not have known, the full scope of what would grow from that single act of compassion. But that was the beauty of it. Harrison had not helped Amelia because he expected anything in return. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do. The love that grew between them, the family they built, the legacy they left behind, all of it was born from that simple choice to be kind when it would have been easier to turn away. And so the story lived on, told and retold, adapted but never fundamentally changed, because the truth of it was too powerful to diminish. A lonely rancher had found a woman sleeping in his barn. Her story had made him offer his name. And that name, that marriage, that partnership, had become the foundation for generations of love, strength, and resilience that continued long after both of them had returned to the earth they had loved so well.